Close your eyes, dear traveler, and let the cares of today slip away like leaves on a gentle stream. You have walked far, through the noise of daily burdens, across the crowded paths of thought, and now you stand at the threshold of a softer, slower world. Tonight I offer you more than just a story. I offer you a passage into a dream, one stitched with threads of history, carried on the hush of a medieval breeze. The world you know, its buzzing devices, its restless clocks, its endless tides of news, fades now into a distant hum, like a melody drifting down a long, winding road. Here, you are safe. Here, you are welcome. Perhaps you are listening from a quiet bedroom in the heart of the city, or beneath the vast open sky of the countryside. Perhaps it is night for you, or the soft blue of dawn. Wherever you are, I invite you to tell me, where do you rest this evening? What corner of the earth holds you as you listen? Share your place and your hour, and know that somewhere, in the quiet hours of someone else's life, they too are joining us in this moment. This is not merely a tale, it is a meeting place for wanderers of time. You are not alone in your listening. Scattered across the globe are other travelers, their eyes closed, their minds drifting with yours. Each of us has come here for the same reason, to set down the heavy pack of the present and step lightly into the echoing halls of the past. And if you find comfort in these journeys, let this become a ritual. Subscribe to our gathering place. Return whenever the weight of the modern world grows too much, and we will walk together again through the corridors of history, guided by the steady lamp of storytelling. Now, let the air change around you. Imagine you have been sleeping, and in that sleep you have traveled, not forward, but backward. Your dreams have folded the centuries like paper, and you wake not to the pale light of your own room, but to the golden glow of a medieval dawn. The air is cool and scented faintly with wood smoke. You hear the gentle creak of timber and the slow, deliberate footsteps of someone tending a hearth. Somewhere close by, a candle sputters, its small flame bending and straightening in the soft draft of an open shutter. The world here is quieter, yet alive with the hum of another kind of life. You feel the weight of a blanket woven by hand, the uneven floor beneath your feet, the subtle chorus of sounds that modern days have forgotten. The far-off call of a morning bell, the shuffle of straw under boots, the whisper of wind through a thatched roof. You are not simply observing this place, you are within it. The centuries between then and now have thinned to nothing. Come, weary traveler. The road into the past stretches before us, winding through meadows and markets, over bridges and under castle gates. With each step, the dream deepens. Let us walk together into history's embrace, for the night is still young, and the medieval world waits to welcome you. You awaken slowly, as though surfacing from the depths of a long and distant dream. Beneath you, the straw mattress crackles faintly with each shift of your body, its rough texture pressing through the thin linen sheet. A heavy woolen blanket rests over you, its weight comforting, though its coarse fibers itch faintly against your skin. The air is cool, and carries with it the faint, earthy scent of damp stone and old timber, mingled with a hint of smoke from last night's dying hearth fire. Somewhere in the quiet, you can hear the subtle patter of a draft slipping through unseen gaps in the wall, its touch grazing your cheek like the whisper of the past. Your eyes open to dim light, and the first thing you see is the uneven surface of a stone wall, mottled with shadow and faintly glistening with morning dampness. A single candle burns on a small wooden table beside you, its flame bending gently with the air's movement. It casts long, wavering shapes upon the walls, shapes that seem to shift and breathe with a life of their own. For a moment, you cannot place yourself. This is not the world you knew. There is no hum of distant roads, no faint glow of modern lights. Only the quiet, the flicker of firelight, and the creak of old wood. The disorientation is sharp at first. Your mind wrestles with questions. Where are you? And why? Yet beneath the confusion, there is no fear. This place does not threaten you. It welcomes you in a strange and gentle way. You sense, without knowing how, that this is no nightmare. Rather, it is an invitation, a chance to walk the worn paths of history, to live for a time in the rhythms of another world. The air itself seems to murmur reassurance. You are safe here. This is your journey, and the past has opened its doors for you. You begin to take in more details. The room is small, its beams low and dark with centuries of smoke. A simple wooden stool stands by the wall, next to a rough-hewn chest with a metal latch. Your feet touch the uneven floor, cool beneath your toes, and you feel the faint grit of straw scattered there. The smells deepen now that you are awake. Smoke, earth, wool, and something faintly sour, like milk that has been set aside for churning into butter. It is a scent born not of neglect, but of a life close to the land, unfiltered by the sterility of the modern age. As you rise, you sense the identity the day has given you. You are no traveler passing through. You are a villager here, a peasant farmer whose hands are meant for soil and seed. There is a certain humility in that role, but also a profound connection to the land, a bond woven into every breath you take. The weight of that truth settles over you, grounding you in a way you did not expect. Then, cutting through the stillness, comes the sound of a rooster crowing beyond the walls. Its call is sharp, insistent, a command to rise and begin the day. The sound does not startle you. Instead, it draws you further into the life that awaits outside. Somewhere beyond this small room, the village is stirring. Feet meeting dirt paths, fires being coaxed into life, water sloshing in wooden pails. The rhythm of the place calls to you, and you find yourself ready to answer. The rooster's cry fades into the sounds of morning. You take one last glance at the candlelight's dance on the wall before stepping toward the door. The day has begun, and with it, your place in this medieval world. The rooster's cry pierces the dawn, sharp and certain, pulling you from the warmth of your straw-stuffed bed. The air in the cottage is cold, holding the last breath of night, and you pull on your rough wool tunic and weathered cloak, the fabric scratching gently against your skin. Your breath hangs faint in the dim light as you fasten the cloak's clasp. Outside, the first pale threads of morning stretch across the sky, painting the thatched roofs in soft silver. You step into the yard, the earth still cool and damp beneath your boots. The village is hushed, save for the distant rush of the stream and the occasional creak of a waking cartwheel. From the small pen, the chickens stir at your approach. You scatter grain from a worn leather pouch, and they cluck and shuffle eagerly, their feathers rustling like dry leaves in the breeze. One particularly bold hen pecks close to your boot, and you smile, the sound of their soft chatter filling the quiet. The goat waits next, tethered beneath the shelter's sloping roof. You kneel beside her, the coarse hay prickling your knees, and rest your head lightly against her warm flank. The milk flows steadily into the pail, each stream making a hollow rhythmic note against the tin. The scent is fresh and sweet, mixing with the heavier perfume of hay and the earthy musk of the pen. She shifts once, snorting softly, then settles again, her breath slow and even. By the shed, the ox is already awake, a deep, steady presence in the shadowed light. His massive head turns toward you as you lift the harness from its peg. Leather straps and iron rings creak under your hands as you fit them over his broad neck. He exhales, a warm gust in the chill air, and paws the ground once before stilling, ready for the fields. The smell of him, warm hide, damp earth, and faint sweat, wraps around you, grounding you in this shared morning labor. Each task flows into the next, without hurry, without pause. This is work that has been done for centuries, under countless dawns, and it carries the same steady rhythm now as it did for those before you. The cluck of hens, the ring of milk in the pail, the leather's creak as it settles into place. Each sound is a verse in the same old song of rural life. When the chores are done, you walk back toward the cottage, the ox's breath fading behind you, the goat returning to her quiet chewing. Smoke curls from a nearby chimney, and a neighbor steps into the lane, adjusting his cap, nodding in greeting. The village is beginning to stir, the low murmur of voices, the soft thud of wood being stacked, the distant bark of a dog. You step inside your home, the warmth from the hearth brushing your chilled hands. The table is set simply, with coarse bread, fresh milk, and a steaming bowl of porridge. Outside, the day stretches ahead, but for now, there is this moment. Family gathering, the cottage filling with quiet conversation, and the comfort of knowing that the work has begun, as it always has, with the rising of the sun. The air inside the cottage is still touched by the cool breath of dawn, but the hearth's fire crackles softly, pushing back the chill. Smoke drifts lazily toward the small hole in the roof, carrying with it the scent of burning wood and the faint aroma of barley simmering in the pot. The single table, rough-hewn and scarred by years of use, sits in the center of the room, surrounded by simple wooden stools. Every creak of the old floorboards, every worn surface, speaks of countless mornings like this one. Your family gathers close, shoulders brushing as everyone takes their place. The light from the fire flickers over familiar faces, lined with work, softened with affection. Before you sits a bowl of steaming barley porridge, thick and plain, alongside a small piece of stale bread. It is not a feast, yet it carries a quiet promise, enough to fuel the body for the day ahead. Beside it, a cup of weak ale waits, its sharp tang cutting the porridge's mildness. Someone murmurs half to themselves, "The porridge is plain, but it fills you with strength." Around you, the rhythm of small sounds becomes a gentle music. The clink of wooden spoons against bowls, the low hum of conversation, your sister speaking of the mending she must finish, your father mentioning the fence by the north field that needs repair. The voices overlap softly, weaving a quiet tapestry of love and habit. There is no grand laughter, no loud cheer, yet the closeness itself warms you as much as the fire. Through the small window, the sky begins to pale. Shadows retreat from the edges of the room, replaced by the gold of the waking sun. The warmth here is steady and grounding, yet a silent urgency builds. The day will not wait. You sip the last of the ale, its faint bitterness lingering, and hear the scrape of stools as your family rises. The bowls are cleared away with the same unhurried efficiency as every morning, each person moving in a familiar dance. You step outside, and the cool air greets you anew, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and distant grass. Behind you, the cottage glows faintly in the morning light, holding the quiet heart of your home. Ahead, the fields stretch toward the horizon, touched by the first strong rays of the sun. They seem to call you, their rows waiting for hands and toil. The warmth of breakfast lingers in your chest, not just from the food, but from the nearness of your family. The day's labor awaits, and you walk toward it with steady steps, the memory of shared voices still carrying you forward. The plow cuts deep, turning earth into promise. Your hands grip the worn wooden handles, knuckles whitening with each push. The ox ahead moves at its slow, steady pace, shoulders rippling under the weight of the yoke, hooves pressing into the damp soil with a soft, rhythmic thud. The rising sun casts a golden sheen across the furrows, catching the fine mist of breath that escapes both beast and man in the cool morning air. You lean into the task, feeling the strain run from your palms, up through your arms, into the ache in your back. The wooden beam creaks with every turn, the earth giving way beneath the iron blade. It is hard, unyielding work, yet there is purpose in every step. Each line carved into the ground is a promise of life to come. The air is rich with the scent of soil, dark, moist, and fertile. Ahead lies the work of the season: wheat, barley, rye. Grain that will feed your family through the long months. Grain that will fill the stores of the Lord's granaries. Without it, there would be no bread, no ale, no seed for the next year. Every clod turned, every root pulled from the furrow, is a step toward survival. Sweat beads on your brow despite the morning chill. It stings your eyes, trickles down your neck, dampening the collar of your tunic. Your muscles burn, but you find a steady rhythm. Push, guide, step. The ox breathes heavily, its ears flicking at flies, but it obeys your voice, responding to the tug of the reins and the pressure of your hand. There is pride in this. Quiet, personal pride. You shape the land with your own strength. You coax life from the earth itself. The ache in your limbs is a reminder that you are not idle, not helpless. You are the one who turns soil into sustenance. And yet this is not your land. The furrows you carve belong to the Lord, as do the fields, the ox, even the seed you sow. Your labor is the price of protection, his sword, his walls, his word against raiders and famine. It is a bargain struck generations before you, one that binds you as surely as the yoke binds the ox. The plow cuts deep. You hear the voice of your father, as if carried on the breeze, turning earth into promise. You repeat it in your mind, letting the words push you forward. Your labor binds you to the Lord's protection, but it also binds you to the future. At last you pause. The ox lowers its head to graze on a patch of grass by the field's edge, steam rising from its flanks. You straighten your back, feeling the stretch and pull of tired muscles. The sun has climbed higher now, warming your face and shoulders. A breeze stirs, carrying with it the scent of young shoots from the far fields. It's then you notice him, a small boy, barefoot, chasing a butterfly between the furrows. His laughter rings clear in the open air, light and unburdened. For a moment, the weight of the plow, the fields, and the futile bargain fades. You watch him run, wondering, what will his hands hold years from now? A plow handle like yours, or perhaps something greater. The butterfly escapes into the blue, and the boy follows, his path unbound, his future unwritten. William was just a boy with bare feet and grass-stained knees, racing through the tall fields that swayed under the summer sun. His laughter carried over the hum of the wind, light and careless, the sound of a child who had never yet thought of crowns or kingdoms. This morning he chased a butterfly, its wings a flicker of gold and white, darting above the furrows. He leapt, reached, missed, and laughed again, tumbling into the warm grass. Then, spotting a stick lying nearby, he snatched it up and swung it through the air like a sword. Each sweep of the wood cut down invisible foes, each step forward a march toward some imagined fortress. William was the son of no one important. His father tilled the soil for another man's table. His mother patched old clothes and baked bread from whatever grain they could keep. They lived in a cottage so small you could cross it in 6 paces, with walls that sighed in the winter wind. Nothing about his life suggested greatness, nothing at all, except perhaps the boy himself. There was a sharpness in his eyes, the kind that noticed more than it should. He saw the way the clouds shifted before the rain came. He heard the change in his father's voice when the harvest was poor. And in his games, there was always victory. Not because his imaginary enemies were weak, but because he refused to lose. Yet no one watching him that morning would have guessed what lay ahead. He was just a child in the fields, just William. The butterfly escaped into the trees, and William dropped his stick, letting his bare feet wander toward the village. It was market day. Stalls lined the dusty square, their tables heavy with baskets of apples, bolts of cloth, and the smell of fresh bread. Villagers called to one another, trading coins and gossip in the same breath. And then, there he was. A rider on a dark horse, cloaked in fine wool with a crest stitched in gold upon his shoulder, the lord of the nearby manor. He rode slowly, his gaze sweeping the market as if searching for something, or perhaps someone. William stood frozen, the noise of the crowd fading into a soft hum. The man's eyes passed over him for only a moment, but in that moment, the boy felt something stir. A pull, like a thread catching on the edge of his soul. It was nothing. It was everything. The rider dismounted and spoke with the village elder, but William's mind was far away. He didn't know why his heart was beating so quickly, or why the sight of this man felt like the opening of a door he had never seen before. Years later, he would look back and know, this was where the path began. This was the moment the boy started walking toward a throne he could not yet imagine. But for now, he was still just William, barefoot, curious, and unaware that destiny had already found him. The morning mist clung low over the thatched rooftops when the Lord's retinue rode into the village. Hooves drummed against the packed dirt road, their polished armor catching the first shards of sunlight. Children peered from behind wooden fences, and elders paused their work to watch the rare procession. William, carrying a bundle of firewood, stopped mid-step as the riders passed. One among them, a tall man in a deep crimson cloak, slowed his horse, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. It lingered on William, not in passing curiosity, but in sharp, measuring interest, as though he had found a diamond in the rough. Later that day, the summons came. The Lord wished to speak with him. Inside the manor's timbered hall, the scent of roasted meat and beeswax candles filled the air. The Lord studied William's frame, asked about his work in the fields, his father's trade, his ability to ride. Every answer seemed to tilt the balance in William's favor, and with a final nod, the Lord offered him a place, not as a servant, but as a squire. The news struck the family like a sudden wind. His mother's eyes shone with pride, though her hands trembled as she packed a small satchel with bread and cheese. His father gripped his shoulder, silent for a long moment before saying, "Make us proud, son." That night, William lay awake listening to the familiar sounds of the village, the creak of the mill wheel, the distant barking of dogs, knowing they would soon fade into memory. The first days at the Lord's estate were overwhelming. The world there moved with a precision and order William had never known. At dawn, he learned to saddle and groom the great destriers, their breath steaming in the cold air. By mid-morning, the clang of steel echoed across the practice yard. The clash of practice swords became his new song, ringing in his ears long after training ended. Under the guidance of seasoned knights, he learned to parry, to thrust, to keep his balance when an opponent's blade came for him. Afternoons were spent in the tilt yard, mastering the art of horsemanship, leaning into turns, guiding his mount with subtle shifts of weight, feeling the raw power of muscle and hoof beneath him. Evenings brought lessons in courtly manners, how to bow, how to address nobility, when to speak and when to remain silent. The great hall glittered with candlelight, silver goblets, and the low murmur of conversations in accents William had never heard before. Weeks turned into months, and his progress was impossible to ignore. His sword arm grew strong, his posture straight, his confidence unshakable. Where once he had been just another village boy, now he was greeted with nods of respect. Stable hands stepped aside when he passed. Other squires looked to him during drills, following his lead. It was during one such session that the Duke of Normandy himself came to observe the training grounds. His presence commanded silence, the kind of stillness that feels heavier than any sound. He watched William's bout closely, eyes narrowing in quiet appraisal. When it ended, the Duke spoke briefly with the Lord, his expression unreadable, before departing with his retinue. For William, that moment was more than a passing curiosity from a great man. It was a door, one that, if he proved himself worthy, might open to ambitions he had never dared to dream. The training yard was alive with the rhythm of steel on steel. Sunlight flashed across polished blades, and the sound of grunts, footwork, and the sharp ring of metal filled the air. Among the squires, one figure moved with a precision and focus that drew every eye: William. The Duke of Normandy stood at the edge of the yard, his arms folded, his gaze sharp and discerning. He had come to inspect his warriors, but his attention lingered on the young squire longer than on any other. "This one," he murmured to his captain, "is no ordinary lad." William's movements were not just skillful, they were instinctive. He anticipated strikes before they landed, recovered with agility, and countered with a force that belied his size. The Duke's eyes narrowed, not in doubt but in recognition. This was a diamond in the rough, and the Duke knew how to polish such stones into weapons of destiny. That evening, William was summoned to the great hall. Torches burned low, casting a golden glow on stone walls adorned with banners. At the far end, the Duke waited, his presence commanding silence. "William," the Duke said, his voice carrying the weight of authority and promise, "you have the heart of a lion and the mind of a tactician. Kneel." William dropped to one knee, head bowed. A hush fell over the hall. The Duke's sword touched first his right shoulder, then his left. "Rise, Sir William," the Duke declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. The hall erupted in applause, but William's heart beat in a measured, steady rhythm. This was no mere honor, it was a beginning. The ceremony was followed by a feast, yet William barely tasted the roasted meats or fine wine. His mind swam with the enormity of the change. This morning, he had been a squire. Tonight, he was a knight, sworn to serve, to lead, to protect. And with that knighthood came something else: land. A small holding near the coast, granted by the Duke himself. He visited his new lands within the fortnight. Rolling green fields, a modest manor, and peasants who now looked to him for protection and guidance. The boy who once labored in the fields was now the lord of them. The weight of it sat on his shoulders like new armor, unfamiliar, yet empowering. But as the weeks passed, another thought began to take root, quiet and persistent. William had tasted advancement, and the flavor was intoxicating. His victories in the yard, his mastery in battle, his growing renown. They whispered of possibilities greater than Normandy. In the Duke's court, talk of England's unstable throne was a constant undercurrent. To many, it was idle gossip. To William, it was the faint outline of a dream, a dangerous dream. Late at night, standing on the battlements of his manor, he would gaze across the dark waters toward the unseen shores of England. The wind would catch his cloak, and in its billowing folds, he imagined the weight of a crown. The Duke, too, saw ambition in William's eyes, and rather than extinguish it, he fanned the flame. Together, they began to speak of plans, of claims, of ships, of war. The crown of England glimmered in William's dreams, no longer a fantasy, but a prize within reach. And so preparations began. The quiet life of the boy from the village was gone forever. Ahead lay an invasion that would shape history and test every ounce of strength he possessed. The summer of 1066 found the shores of Normandy alive with the thunder of preparation. Along the coastline, forests of masts swayed gently in the wind, each ship painstakingly built for one singular purpose: to carry William and his destiny across the narrow but treacherous English Channel. The air was thick with the scent of tar and fresh-cut timber. Blacksmiths hammered out spearheads that gleamed in the sun, while fletchers bundled arrows by the thousand. Horses stamped restlessly in their pens, sensing the tension that hung over men and beast alike. William moved among them with the unhurried stride of a man utterly certain of his cause. His gaze swept the shoreline, taking in the ranks of armored knights, the lines of archers, the siege engines lashed and ready for loading. Each element of his force was meticulously arranged, a war machine waiting for its commander's signal. The Duke's voice was steady as he addressed his captains. "This is not merely a fight for land. This is a fight for our rightful crown, for the honor of Normandy, for the promise we carry to our sons." His men, hardened by years of service, listened in rapt silence. Their loyalty sealed not only by fealty, but by the conviction that they were part of history in the making. The sea, however, was an adversary in its own right. As the fleet pushed away from the safety of the Norman shore, the channel greeted them with an unsettling mix of gusting wind and foaming waves. Ships creaked and groaned, their sails straining against the pull of the storm. Salt spray stung eyes and soaked armor, yet William stood at the prow of his flagship, unmoving, a dark silhouette against the slate-gray sky. His voice cut through the wind like a drawn blade. "Hold fast, men! The storm will bow to our will as England shall bow to our sword." For hours, the fleet battled nature's fury. The waves seemed intent on swallowing the ambition of Normandy whole, but discipline and seamanship prevailed. Slowly, the dark outline of England began to rise on the horizon, a promise and a challenge in equal measure. On the English side, Harold Godwinson, recently crowned King of England, was no stranger to war. A seasoned commander, he had already faced and repelled an invasion from the north only days before. Yet the news of William's landing reached him with chilling speed. Harold knew that the coming battle would decide not just a throne, but the very soul of his kingdom. The Norman fleet made landfall on the southern coast, near Pevensey, with the precision of a hammer striking an anvil. Soldiers waded ashore, boots sinking into wet sand, their banners snapping in the wind. The clatter of armor and the low rumble of war horses announced that this was no mere raid. This was the beginning of a campaign that would not end until one man's claim to the English throne lay shattered. William wasted no time. His men secured the coastline, established supply lines, and prepared for the inevitable march inland. The English shore looms, a land to be won, he murmured to his most trusted knight, his eyes never leaving the green hills ahead. Farther north, Harold gathered his remaining strength, his army marching hard to meet this foreign threat. Two worlds, two destinies, were on a collision course. By the time the Norman banners fluttered near Hastings, the stage was set. The fields would soon echo with the clash of steel and the cries of men, as William's fate and England's future hung in the balance. The autumn morning of October 14th, 1066, dawned gray and cold, a pale mist curling over the fields near the Sussex town of Hastings. Across the rolling ground, the English army stood in a long, solid line upon the crest of Senlac Hill. Shields overlapped, their wooden rims locking into an unbroken wall. Axes and spears jutted between the gaps, their blades catching what little light pierced the clouds. The men were silent, grim-faced, their resolve forged by years of defending their lands. "The English stand like an iron wall, unyielding," one Norman knight muttered as he looked up at the ridge. Below, William's army, Normans, Bretons, and Flemish allies, waited for the signal. Banners snapped in the wind, horses stamped and snorted, and the air reeked of leather, sweat, and anticipation. William rode along the front lines, his armor gleaming even under the muted sky. He raised his voice so all could hear. "Men of Normandy, remember why you are here. The crown of England is promised to us. Today, we carve destiny with our own hands." The horns sounded, and the first Norman cavalry surged forward. Hooves thundered against the earth, and the sound rolled up the hill like distant storm waves. But the English shield wall held. Norman lances splintered, swords rang against wood and iron, and the hillside became a melee of shouting men, rearing horses, and flashing steel. Again and again the Normans charged, only to be thrown back, the English formation unbroken. Hours passed. The tide of the battle seemed to turn against the Normans. A rumor spread that William had been killed, and panic began to ripple through the ranks. But William, sensing disaster, rode to the front, tearing off his helmet to show his face. "I live, and with me, victory lives," he cried. His voice cut through the chaos, and the men rallied once more. Then came the cunning move that would change the course of the day. William ordered a feigned retreat. The front ranks of his army pulled back in apparent disorder, turning their horses to flee. From the ridge, the English, thinking their enemy broken, abandoned the safety of the shield wall to pursue. Down the slope they came, eager to strike the killing blow, straight into the trap. The Normans wheeled around suddenly, surrounding the pursuing English and cutting them down. With the shield wall now weakened and gaps appearing in the line, William's forces renewed their assault with fresh vigor. The turning point came in a moment of fate and legend. Amid the press of men, King Harold Godwinson was struck. Some say by a Norman arrow to the eye, others by the sword of a mounted knight. Whatever the truth, the cry went up. "The king is down." The English line faltered. Resistance crumbled as Norman troops pressed forward, driving the last defenders from the field. By evening, the slopes of Senlac Hill were littered with the dead and dying. The air hung heavy with smoke from scattered fires and the metallic scent of blood. William stood at the crest, looking over the silent field. He had won, not only the battle, but the crown of England. Yet the price lay at his feet in the form of thousands who would never see another dawn. The path now lay open to London, where the Duke of Normandy would soon be crowned King William III. But in that moment, as the sun set over Hastings, the weight of conquest pressed heavily on his shoulders. Snow lay soft upon London on Christmas morning, 1066, muting the sounds of the waking city. Yet inside the soaring walls of Westminster Abbey, The air trembled with anticipation. Torches cast flickering light across carved stone columns, the smoke mingling with the scent of incense. Norman knights stood in polished armor, their cloaks heavy with embroidery, while English clerics in solemn robes prepared the sacred rites. At the center of it all knelt William of Normandy, the conqueror who had crossed a sea, shattered an army, and seized a crown. The archbishop's voice rang through the abbey as he anointed William with holy oil, a ritual binding the throne not just to power, but to divine authority. "Will you uphold the laws of this land and protect its people?" The question rose in both Latin and English. William's voice, deep and deliberate, answered, "I will." The crown, gold, heavy, set with stones that caught the torchlight, was placed upon his brow. At that moment, a cheer erupted from those inside and outside the abbey. Yet the sound was so sudden and fierce that Norman guards mistook it for an uprising. Steel rang out, swords drawn, until the misunderstanding was quelled. It was an omen of the unease to come. This kingdom, though won, was far from tamed. From that day, Norman rule began to reshape England. French became the language of the royal court, of law, and of high society. Anglo-Saxon nobles who had ruled for generations found themselves stripped of titles and lands, replaced by William's loyal Norman barons. The old aristocracy was swept aside in weeks, and with it, centuries of tradition. In the countryside, a new kind of fortress began to rise, the Norman motte and bailey castles. From the towering White Tower in London to timber strongholds scattered across hills and riversides, these fortresses were both military bulwarks and blunt declarations of dominance. They loomed over villages, a daily reminder of the new order. William's reign was not without resistance. Rebellions flared in the north, and whispers of discontent lingered in every shire. The English people, proud and stubborn, chafed under foreign lords and foreign laws. William, for all his iron will, understood that a kingdom divided could not endure. He began a careful balancing act, rewarding loyalty, enforcing harsh punishment where rebellion brewed, and integrating English customs where they served his rule. In council, he spoke of a kingdom united under one crown, a land made stronger by the blending of Norman strength and Anglo-Saxon resilience. Yet he knew the process would take years, perhaps lifetimes. Still, the coronation had set events in motion that could not be undone. The Norman conquest had changed England's language, law, architecture, and very identity. In time, this fusion would give rise to something new, a nation neither wholly Norman nor wholly Anglo-Saxon, but unmistakably English. As William stood atop the battlements of the Tower of London in the months after his coronation, he looked out over the Thames and the city beyond. Snow still crowned the rooftops, and smoke from countless hearths curled into the sky. The crown was heavy, as all crowns are, but it was his and he intended to keep it. Across the rolling hills and river valleys of England, new shapes began to rise, bold, defiant, and unlike anything the land had seen before. The Normans, fresh from victory, wasted no time securing their conquest. Their answer was simple yet commanding: the Motte and Bailey Castle. First came the mound, the motte, piled high with earth by the sweat of peasants and the orders of their Norman lords. On its flattened crown, carpenters raised tall wooden towers, their sharpened timbers forming a crown of spikes against the sky. Below, at the foot of the motte, spread the bailey, a bustling courtyard encircled by stout palisades. Here, blacksmiths hammered iron, bakers tended smoky ovens, and guards sharpened spears. The construction was as much a statement as it was a strategy. The motte rises like a giant's fist, claiming the land, one onlooker was heard to say. For the conquered Anglo-Saxons, these towering silhouettes were constant reminders of Norman power, fortresses from which the new lords could watch, rule, and if needed, punish. But wood could burn, and in time, timber gave way to stone. The Normans replaced their wooden towers with solid keeps, their thick walls and narrow windows designed to withstand siege and arrow alike. Stone bridges spanned moats filled with murky water, while gatehouses bristled with iron portcullises. No longer just a lord's refuge, these fortresses became permanent anchors of Norman authority, visible for miles around. Inside, life pulsed with its own rhythm. In the great hall, tapestries hung on cold stone, softening the chill and telling tales of conquest and bloodlines. Servants carried trenchers piled with roasted meat, their footsteps echoing beneath timbered ceilings. Feasts stretched long into the night, the clink of goblets mingling with the notes of a lute. Within these walls, lords weave plans and dreams, murmured one visiting knight, watching a quiet council in the firelight. Beyond the hall, courtyards rang with the clash of swords as young squires drilled under the watchful eye of veterans hardened by campaigns in Normandy and England alike. Horses stamped in stables, and falcons jostled restlessly on their perches. Every corner had a purpose, from the armory stocked with crossbows to the kitchen gardens growing herbs for both cooking and medicine. Yet castles were more than fortresses. They were living symbols. They guarded trade routes, cowed rebellious towns, and offered shelter during raids. Peasants would flee to their gates at the first sight of enemy banners, knowing the thick walls would hold. And for the Normans themselves, each castle was a foothold, stone proof that England was theirs now, not just by battle, but by presence. As the years passed, hundreds of these castles studded the countryside, from the windswept shores of Northumberland to the green fields of Wessex. Travelers could trace the spread of Norman control by following their jagged silhouettes across the skyline. But power was never purely military. As the castles grew stronger, another kind of structure began to rise alongside them, soaring not to command the land, but to touch the heavens. From the fortress walls, one could often see the framework of a new cathedral rising in the distance, its spires a counterpoint to the battlements. The age of stone had come to England, not just in defense, but in faith. And as the towers of castles reached for the sky in defiance, the towers of cathedrals reached upward in devotion. The first glimpse is enough to steal your breath. Before you rises a cathedral, its stone walls etched with centuries of devotion, its spires reaching heavenward as if in conversation with the clouds. Morning sunlight catches the stained glass windows, igniting them into jeweled panels of ruby, sapphire, and emerald. The colors spill across the flagstones, bathing the floor in shifting patterns of light, a moving mosaic beneath your feet. This is no mere building. It is a statement, a prayer, and a promise carved in stone. Every arch, every column, every flying buttress speaks of human hands, guided by faith and ambition. Here, the poor and the noble kneel side by side, their whispered prayers blending into the same eternal plea. Inside, the air is heavy with incense, carrying the scent of centuries. Shafts of colored light fall on rows of wooden pews, and the echo of footsteps disappears into the vastness. From somewhere deep within, the voices of monks rise in Gregorian chant, measured, solemn, timeless. The sound wraps around you, drawing your mind upward, as though the music itself is a ladder to heaven. But the cathedral is more than a place of worship. It is the beating heart of the community. Its doors never close to those in need, whether they seek food, shelter, counsel, or absolution. Here, marriages are blessed, disputes are settled, and kings kneel before bishops. Within these walls, the lines between spiritual authority and political power blur, and the church's voice carries weight in every corner of medieval life. It is also a school, a library, a sanctuary for knowledge. Scrolls and illuminated manuscripts rest in the cathedral's treasury, guarded as zealously as relics. In its shadow, scribes bend over parchment, recording not just scripture, but histories, laws, and the wisdom of the ancients. The cathedral nourishes the mind as much as it tends the soul. Every part of its design tells a story. The rose windows speak of creation, the carvings above the doors warn of judgment, and the high altar gleams with gold, a reminder of both heavenly glory and earthly wealth. The sheer scale of it humbles even the proudest lord. The cathedral, a monk might whisper, stands as a bridge to the divine. Yet beyond its spiritual purpose, lies a subtle message of dominance. To build such a structure takes wealth, labor, and influence, resources only the most powerful can command. Every soaring spire and ringing bell declares the presence of the church, not just to the faithful, but to rulers and rivals alike. As you stand there listening to the chant, you can feel the centuries stretching out around you. The stones under your feet have borne witness to countless lives, joys, and sorrows. Here, faith has been tested and renewed 1,000 times. And in the quiet between the bells, the cathedral seems to speak. All things pass, but I endure. Stone walls enclose the monastery like an island of silence in a restless world. Beyond the heavy gates, the clamor of villages fades to a hush, replaced by the steady rhythm of a life devoted to prayer, learning, and labor. At dawn, the great bell tolls, its deep voice summoning the brothers from their narrow cells. They move in quiet procession toward the chapel, sandals scuffing against cold stone floors, hoods drawn over bowed heads. In the dim light of early morning, candles flicker in the chapel, casting long shadows over carved wooden stalls. Gregorian chants rise in unison, voices blending into a single thread of devotion. Hours are marked not by the turning of clocks, but by the cycle of prayer, the Opus Dei, the work of God, binding each monk's day into sacred order. After prayer comes labor. In the gardens, monks bend over rows of herbs and vegetables, their hands working the earth with practiced care. Some tend to the orchard or the beehives, others repair the walls or manage the stores. But the heart of the monastery's intellect beats in the scriptorium. Here, beneath tall arched windows, robed figures sit at wooden desks, their faces bent close to parchment. The faint scratch of quills fills the room, steady and patient. Gold leaf glimmers as illuminators bring intricate borders and sacred scenes to life, their colors rich as stained glass. The quill scratches softly, guarding the past, one might say, for each manuscript is a treasure, copies of scripture, ancient philosophy, and histories that would otherwise vanish in the mists of time. The monastery is not only a spiritual refuge, it is also an economic power. Vast tracts of land belong to it, worked by peasants who owe service and rent to the brothers. Barns overflow with grain, and cellars with wine. Pilgrims arrive seeking blessings, leaving offerings and thanks. Over time, this wealth builds influence, and influence tempts even the most pious hearts. Not all monks are immune to worldly desire. Some dream of greater titles or whisper of politics beyond the cloister's walls. A tension hums quietly beneath the vows of poverty, between those who see wealth as a means to serve God and those who see it as a means to serve themselves. Such ambitions are rarely voiced openly, but they leave their shadow on the monastery's stone floors. Some monks dream of power, even here, it is said, as eyes glance toward the abbot's chamber. Yet for most, life remains a steady offering, prayers at dawn, work in the day, chants at dusk. The monastery stands as a sanctuary of learning in an age often marked by war and uncertainty. Within these walls, the past is preserved, and the present is disciplined by devotion. But beyond the quiet courtyards, the world is changing. In the bustling towns, merchants trade goods from far-off lands. In royal halls, kings and barons scheme over borders. And in the hearts of men, both noble and common, the call of the church grows louder, not only in whispers of peace, but in cries for holy war. Soon, the monks' prayers will mingle with the footsteps of armed pilgrims, their manuscripts with the banners of crusading knights. The serenity of the cloister will give way to the fervor of a church that commands not only souls, but armies. The year is 1095. In a vast open field outside the city of Clermont, France, thousands gather under a pale autumn sky. Cloaks rustle in the cold breeze. The air hums with anticipation as a single figure steps forward. Pope Urban II, robed in white and gold, his voice carrying the authority of heaven itself. "My brothers in Christ," he begins, his words sharp and clear, "the Holy Sepulchre is in the hands of the infidel. Our sacred city of Jerusalem cries out for deliverance." A murmur ripples through the crowd. Urban's voice rises, each phrase like the toll of a great bell. Take up the cross, knights, for glory in God. He promises the remission of sins, the crown of eternal life for those who fight in God's name. To a society steeped in faith, the offer is irresistible, an earthly quest with heavenly reward. Men fall to their knees, some weeping, others clutching sword hilts. In a fever of conviction, they take strips of red cloth and sew them onto their tunics, the sign of the cross, a public vow that they will march east. This moment will echo across continents and centuries. The first to rise are seasoned knights, men who have tasted both battle and loss, but they are joined by peasants, merchants, and even monks, all swept into the tide of holy fervor. A chant swells from the crowd, Deus vult, God wills it. Soon, roads across Europe fill with the sound of hooves and the creak of wagons. Banners snap in the wind, bearing the cross in white, red, or gold. The Crusaders move toward the distant Holy Land, driven by zeal, duty, and the dream of immortal glory. But the journey is no parade. The road is long and merciless. Crossing the Alps tests both body and soul. Snow blinds the eyes. Frostbite claims fingers. In the searing deserts beyond, water skins dry before noon, and heat shimmers off the sand like the breath of a furnace. Many never see Jerusalem, their bones left behind on foreign soil. For the knights who press on, doubt begins to whisper beneath the armor. They remember Urban's promises of paradise, but the road is littered with hunger, sickness, and the cries of the dying. Somewhere in the back of every mind lurks the question, is this truly God's will or the ambition of men? Yet still they march. At night, campfires flicker under alien skies. The air smells of dust and smoke. Tales of miracles and omens pass from tongue to tongue, fortifying their resolve. Jerusalem is no longer just a place. It has become a vision, a prize worth any sacrifice. And on the horizon lies the moment of reckoning. The walls of Jerusalem will soon rise before them, and with it, the test of all they have endured. The scene darkens. Drums echo against stone. The Crusaders gather at dawn before the gates, ready to unleash a storm of steel and faith upon the city. The siege of Jerusalem is about to begin. The summer sun of 1099 blazed mercilessly over the stone walls of Jerusalem. For weeks, the Crusaders had camped outside the city, their bodies lean from hunger, their armor baking in the heat. Siege towers, patched with scavenged wood, inched closer day by day. Every night, prayers rose into the desert air, pleas for strength, for victory, for God's will to be done. At dawn on July 15th, the final assault began. Drums pounded, horns blared, arrows darkened the sky. The clash of iron and cries of the wounded echoed against the sacred stones. A siege tower, pushed by dozens of straining men, ground toward the northern wall. Scaling ladders slammed into place, and with a shuddering roar, the Crusaders surged upward. The defenders fought with equal desperation. Stones hurled from above, boiling oil poured in sheets. But the tide had turned. A breach opened. The Crusaders poured through like a flood. Inside, chaos reigned. Swords flashed in the narrow streets. The walls fall, but at what cost? One weary knight muttered as he stepped over bodies, both enemy and friend. The scent of blood and smoke mingled, choking the air. The holy city, so long sought, became a place of slaughter. Men, women, and children, Muslim, Jewish, and even some Eastern Christians, were caught in the fury. Chroniclers later wrote that the streets ran red. By nightfall, banners bearing the cross fluttered from Jerusalem's towers. The city was theirs, but victory had a hollow weight. Some knights knelt in the church of the Holy Sepulchre, weeping in exhaustion and awe, believing their souls cleansed. Others wandered the ruins in silence, their armor heavy with dust and guilt. The walls fall, but at what cost? Became a whispered refrain among those who had seen too much. In the days that followed, the Crusaders organized their spoils. Leaders carved the land into Christian kingdoms, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Tripoli. outposts of Latin Christendom in the Levant. Yet they were fragile creations, surrounded by powerful Muslim states, dependent on reinforcements from Europe, and divided by rivalries among their own lords. For the people who had called Jerusalem home before the Crusaders' arrival, life was irrevocably changed. Survivors fled or adapted under the new rule, nursing grievances that would fester for generations. The victors, too, carried their scars, memories of comrades lost, and the unsettling knowledge that holiness had been claimed through rivers of blood. Still, amidst the ruin, something unexpected began to stir. In the marketplaces, merchants from both sides hesitantly traded goods: silks, spices, glassware, and steel. A few scholars, carried by curiosity rather than conquest, sought out the knowledge preserved in Arabic manuscripts. Even in the shadow of violence, the world had cracked open, and through the fractures came glimpses of cultures unfamiliar yet strangely compelling. New worlds open, even in blood, a crusader remarked quietly as he fingered a strange bronze coin bearing foreign script. The siege of Jerusalem would be remembered as both triumph and tragedy, a sacred goal achieved, but at a moral cost that could never be undone. And yet, in the mingling of victors and vanquished, seeds of exchange had been sown, seeds that would, over time, shape the destinies of East and West alike. The story now shifts from the clash of armies to the quieter, subtler currents the Crusades unleashed, currents of trade, art, and ideas that would ripple across continents. The last Crusaders who made the long march home carried with them more than scars and fading banners. From the crowded bazaars of Antioch and Damascus, they brought back sacks of saffron, cinnamon, and cloves, fragrances so rich they seemed to hold the warmth of the desert sun itself. Bolts of silk shimmered in the light, dyed in colors that no loom in Europe had yet mastered. Fine steel, worked into curved blades, gleamed with the craftsmanship of distant lands. But it was not only goods that returned. Ideas crossed borders just as silently. Crusaders, merchants, and wandering scholars carried with them new philosophies, drawn from the libraries of Arab scholars and the ancient wisdom preserved in Byzantine halls. They spoke of numbers that could count the stars, of medicine that could ease pain and heal wounds with strange herbs, of maps that showed seas yet unseen by European eyes. The ports of Venice, Genoa, and Marseille grew crowded with ships, their holds heavy with treasures. Trade routes stretched further and deeper into the east, weaving a network that tied Europe to lands beyond its imagination. In dim, candlelit workshops, artisans experimented with techniques learned from foreign masters: glass that caught the light like trapped fire, fabrics that seemed to flow like water. With each caravan and cargo ship, the world grew smaller. To the nobles and scholars, it was a revelation. The Crusades, for all their bloodshed, had cracked open the door to knowledge, and through that opening poured the beginnings of an intellectual awakening. Yet, while the courts and monasteries buzzed with talk of strange spices and curious devices, the common plowman felt little change. His days still began with the crow of the rooster and ended with the setting sun. The bread on his table tasted no richer for the saffron in the ports, nor did the silk soften the calluses on his hands. For him, the East was a tale told by travelers, as distant and unlikely as the stars above. Still, those tales carried weight. Even in the humblest tavern, whispers of the world beyond the village sparked wonder, and sometimes unease. If such marvels existed across the seas, what else might come? Silks and spices carry whispers of the East, murmured a merchant to his apprentice as they unloaded their cargo. The boy nodded, eyes wide, imagining cities with golden domes and streets where languages mixed like colors on a painter's palette. But alongside the perfumes and polished steel, something else traveled, something unseen. In the back alleys of port cities and along the dusty roads where traders met, rumors stirred of a new and terrible pestilence. A sickness that turned the skin black as ink, that swept through towns with the force of a storm. "A new world stirs, unseen by the plowmen," said an old mariner, staring into the horizon. and not all of it is welcome. The ships kept coming. The market stayed lively. But the shadow on the horizon was growing. Soon it would fall over every castle and cottage alike. The year was 1347, when the first whispers of a strange illness began drifting across Europe's harbors. Merchant ships docked in Sicily, their sails tattered and their decks strangely silent. The few men still alive stumbled ashore, their skin blotched with dark swellings and their eyes clouded with fever. Within days they were dead. What they carried was not gold or silk, but a pestilence that would sweep across the continent like a storm, the Black Death. It moved with a swiftness that defied reason. From ports in Italy, the sickness spread inland along trade roads and rivers, carried by rats and their fleas, hidden in sacks of grain, tucked into the seams of cloaks. Cities fell in weeks, villages disappeared in days. There was no safe place. Plague rode in every cart and clung to every breath of wind. The symptoms were as horrifying as they were merciless. It began with fever and chills, then came the swellings, buboes, hard black lumps that rose under the arms, in the groin, along the neck. Within hours, victims coughed blood, their skin blotched with bruised patches as if death was blooming inside them. For many, the end came in less than 3 days. Priests could not keep pace with last rites. Gravediggers could not keep pace with the dead. Panic became as contagious as the disease itself. Families abandoned sick relatives, towns barred their gates, and roads fell silent except for the wheels of death carts. In some places, processions of flagellants, men whipping their own backs bloody, marched through the streets, believing sin had brought God's wrath. Others turned to charms, incense, or strange diets, hoping to ward off the unseen killer. None of it worked. The toll was staggering. In a matter of years, entire regions were hollowed out. Fields went untended, harvests rotted where they lay, and livestock wandered ownerless. Church bells tolled so often they became part of the background, a grim heartbeat to daily life. "Death rides the wind, sparing none," murmured one survivor as he stood in a market square emptied of life. Amid the devastation, humanity's certainties crumbled. Faith was tested, bonds of kinship frayed, and the old order began to shift. By the time the plague's first great wave receded, Europe was a changed land, emptier, yes, but also restless, its survivors forever marked by what they had seen. The streets choked with the fallen would in time give way to new ways of living, new ways of thinking. For the moment, however, the world felt broken beyond repair. The ashes of the dead would become the soil for change. In the wake of the Black Death, society would be forced to rebuild itself, and in doing so, it would plant the seeds of a different future. The year after the plague felt like waking from a nightmare, except the world that awaited was quieter, emptier, and strangely altered. Where once there had been the rhythmic clatter of mills and the laughter of children in market squares, now there was only the sigh of wind through abandoned cottages and the creak of gates left swinging. Whole villages lay deserted, fields overgrown with weeds. Livestock wandered without herdsmen, and the churchyards were swollen with unmarked graves. For those who survived, grief was constant. Every path, every doorway, seemed to hold a memory of someone who had not made it through. Mothers wept for sons, brothers buried sisters, and entire lineages were snuffed out in weeks. Yet alongside this sorrow, something unexpected began to stir, an awakening born from necessity. The plague had thinned the ranks of laborers so drastically that the balance of power shifted almost overnight. Landlords, once commanding an endless pool of peasants bound to their manors, now found themselves scrambling to keep what land they had productive. The fields lie silent, one weary steward was heard to say, but the survivors rise. Farmers and craftsmen realized they could demand higher wages, better working conditions, or simply leave for another lord willing to offer more. The iron chains of feudal obligation, long accepted as unbreakable, began to rust and fall away. In towns, guilds felt the loss too. Skilled hands were scarce, and apprentices suddenly found themselves courted like seasoned masters. The old rules, wages fixed by custom, movement restricted by birth, no longer held the same weight. This new bargaining power gave peasants and workers a taste of something they had never known before: agency. "Peasants dare to dream of more," murmured one merchant in London as he watched farmers walking the streets with heads held higher than before. The nobility resisted. Edicts like England's Statute of Labourers in 1351 tried to freeze wages at pre-plague levels and punish those who sought better terms. But laws written on parchment could not bind the will of a people who had glimpsed a freer life. Many simply ignored the decrees, traveling to other towns or hiding in the anonymity of growing cities. This shift was not without its shadows. Families fractured as young people left their birthplaces in search of opportunity. Some communities, already weakened, collapsed entirely. The church, too, felt the aftershocks, its authority shaken by the plague's indiscriminate cruelty and its clergy thinned by death. Faith endured, but it was tinged now with questions. Still, amidst the loss, a quiet resilience grew. Survivors learned to till abandoned fields, mend empty houses, and rebuild shattered communities in their own image. The plague had not only taken lives, it had cracked the foundations of an old order, making room for something new to grow. Beyond England, across the narrow sea, another force was already stirring, one that would test these newly emboldened commoners and reshape kingdoms themselves. As the scars of pestilence still marked the land, banners of war began to rise once more. Kings vie for crowns, while fields burn. The dispute began with a claim, a tangled web of bloodlines and broken promises that stretched across the Channel. England and France, two great kingdoms bound by history and rivalry, locked horns over who had the rightful claim to the French throne. What started as a matter of noble succession soon ignited a war that would rage for over a century, shaping the destiny of nations and common folk alike. The battlefields became grim theaters of valor and despair. Knights, clad in heavy armor, charged into muddy fields, their banners snapping in the cold wind. Arrows darkened the skies like a deadly rain, and the cries of men and horses mingled with the clashing of steel. At Crusades and Poitiers, the English longbowmen stood firm, their relentless volleys toppling knights and shifting the tide of battle. Yet victory came at a price. Towns were pillaged, homes burned, and families torn apart. The war's shadow stretched far beyond the front lines, reaching into every hearth and heart. Soldiers bore scars both seen and hidden. The weight of armor pressed heavily on tired shoulders, but the greater burden was the uncertainty of survival. Letters from home carried news of loss and longing. For peasants, the war meant more than distant glory. It meant taxes raised, fields left untended, and neighbors gone to fight or never return. "The war's shadow falls on every hearth," whispered mothers, clutching children as rumors of conscription swept through villages. As the battles wore on, the old world began to crumble. The feudal bonds that once tied lords and peasants grew fragile under the strain of war and disease. Nobles struggled to raise armies from a shrinking pool of men, while peasants found new leverage, their labor in greater demand. The war did not just redraw maps, it reshaped society itself, but amidst the grand sweep of history, the story circles back to you, rooted in the fields and simple rhythms of peasant life. The distant thunder of war reminds you that even in the shadow of kings and castles, life goes on. The plow must still turn the earth, the bread must still be baked, and in the quiet moments between battles, the hope for peace and stability whispers like the wind through the grain. You awaken again to your world, the weight of the day's work, the scent of fresh earth, the steady breath of the ox beside you. Though kings fight and kingdoms fall, the heartbeat of the land endures. Your hands, calloused but strong, hold the future in the turning soil. The 100 Years' War rages beyond the horizon, but here, in this field, your story continues. The rooster calls, and the day begins anew. You awaken to the familiar crow, sharp and insistent, slicing through the cool morning air. The scent of smoke curls lazily from the chimney, mingling with the rich, earthy aroma of dew-soaked fields. It is a scent you know as well as your own breath, a reminder that the world turns on the quiet rhythms of dawn. Slowly, you rise from the straw mattress, muscles stiff but ready. Your hands reach for the rough woolen tunic hanging nearby, the coarse fabric scratching softly against your skin as you dress. Outside, the first pale light spills over the village rooftops, casting long shadows on the uneven cobblestones. The day awaits. You step into the yard, greeted by the soft rustling of animals stirring. Chickens cluck and peck eagerly at scattered grain, their feathers ruffled by the cool breeze. The goats nuzzle close, warm and trusting. You move among them with practiced ease, feeding, milking, tending, the quiet duties that anchor the day. Each familiar task feels like a heartbeat in the steady pulse of village life. Back inside the cottage, the hearth glows with embered warmth. On the rough wooden table sits a simple breakfast: coarse bread, still warm from yesterday's oven, and a cup of weak ale, enough to steady the stomach for the labor ahead. Family gathers around, the soft murmur of voices filling the small space. Conversation is sparse but comforting. The unspoken bond of shared hardship and care wraps around you like a well-worn cloak. Beyond the walls, the village stirs to life. The blacksmith's hammer rings out, steady and sure, shaping iron that will serve both tool and weapon. The baker's oven breathes heat, sending waves of warmth and the sweet smell of bread through the narrow streets. Children chase one another, their laughter weaving through the air like birdsong. The market stalls begin to bustle with early trades: pots, cloth, fresh produce. It is a world both small and vital, its every sound a thread in the fabric of your day. Soon, the fields call you back, their endless rows of green and brown stretching toward the horizon. You walk the path well worn by generations, the soft earth yielding beneath your boots. Here, the work is hard and unending: tilling, sowing, weeding, harvesting, the very acts that sustain life itself. As you labor, your thoughts drift to the place you hold in this vast medieval order. A peasant, bound by duty and law to the Lord who claims these lands, your life shaped by forces far greater than yourself. Yet within this structure, there is purpose. Your toil feeds families. Your hands shape the seasons. Though your path is narrow, it is part of a greater whole, a delicate balance of power and survival. The village hums with life's steady pulse, a song as old as the stones beneath your feet. And in this rhythm, waking, working, resting, enduring, you find a kind of peace, a quiet strength that carries you through each day. The sun climbs higher, shadows retreating. The day stretches before you, full of labor and small victories. The world beyond may be vast and uncertain, but here, in this field, you are grounded. Your story, like the land you tend, grows with each rising dawn. As you bend over the soil, turning earth with steady hands, your mind drifts beyond the furrows to the vast web that holds this world together: the feudal system. Above you, like the towering oaks in the distant woods, stands a rigid order, centuries old and unyielding. At the very top is the king, distant and powerful, whose word shapes the fate of kingdoms and common folk alike. Below him, the nobles, lords and barons, rule their lands with sword and decree, their castles like stone thrones watching over the countryside. Then comes the church, its spires piercing the sky, its influence reaching into every corner of life, offering hope, imposing laws, and commanding reverence. And here you are, a peasant, bound by duty and birthright to this world. Your hands work the land that you do not own, for it belongs to the Lord whose manor rises just beyond the fields. From here, you can glimpse the manor's sturdy walls, smoke curling from its chimneys, and the church's steeple standing tall, a reminder of both sanctuary and control. The Lord's men pass along the roads, their armor catching the sun, their presence a constant shadow on your labor. Your life is tied to this land and to the Lord who claims it. You owe him crops and service, protection in return for your sweat and toil. Freedom is a distant dream, whispered in the market towns that grow like seedlings far from the fields. There, traders gather with goods from near and far, and the old rules begin to loosen like worn ropes. Change whispers on the wind, subtle but persistent. The rise of towns and trade brings new opportunities, new ways of living. Peasants talk quietly in the village about shifting laws and the chance to buy freedom. The rigid bonds of feudalism show cracks, though the weight of tradition holds strong. As the sun dips low, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, you leave the fields behind. The evening brings its own rhythm, a time to gather with family by the hearth, to share stories that warm the heart and ease the mind. Around the flickering firelight, tales unfold, of heroes and battles, of the land's ancient spirits, of dreams beyond the fields. These stories offer solace, weaving hope into the fabric of everyday life. They remind you that even within this system, the human spirit yearns for something more. Your labor ties you to the Lord, yes, but the world stirs beyond the village gates. The old ways may endure for now, but beneath the surface, change grows, slow, inevitable, and filled with possibility. Tonight, as shadows lengthen and voices soften, you rest in the company of those who share your journey. Tomorrow, the fields will call again, but for now, you listen to the crackling fire, to the stories, and to the promise of a world in motion. The day's labor fades away as the family gathers close to the hearth, its warm glow casting flickering shadows that dance across tired but eager faces. The fire crackles softly, sending sparks swirling upward like tiny stars escaping into the night. The scent of burning wood mingles with the faint aroma of stew simmering slowly nearby, wrapping the room in comfort and familiarity. Seated near the flickering flames, the mother's voice rises gently, weaving a story that carries the room into another world. She speaks of a legendary knight, brave and true, whose sword shone like sunlight on a summer's day, and whose heart was as steadfast as the ancient oaks surrounding their village. Her words paint vivid pictures of daring quests, fierce battles, and honor won not by birth but by courage and wisdom. The listeners, young and old alike, lean in closer, their eyes reflecting the firelight and the wonder that the tale kindles. In this world where few can read or write, stories are the treasures passed down through generations. They are more than mere entertainment. They are lessons carved into memory, guiding the hearts and minds of all who hear. These tales teach strength in adversity, the value of loyalty, and the hope that even those born humble can reach for greatness. As the mother's voice softens with the story's close, a shared silence settles over the room, an unspoken reverence for the heroes of old and the dreams they inspire. The fire's warmth seems to hold the family together, binding them with invisible threads of tradition and hope. The stories become a sanctuary, a place where worries of the day fade and imagination takes flight. Here, even peasants can touch the stars, carried on the wings of legends and dreams. As the last embers glow faintly and the night deepens, eyelids grow heavy. The listener's thoughts drift from the hearth to distant lands, castles towering on hills, knights in gleaming armor, and quests that stretch beyond the horizon. The flickering firelight fades into the soft shadows of sleep, carrying with it the magic of the stories and the promise of adventures yet to come. Tonight, beneath the humble roof and the watchful stars, the past and future entwine, held in the warmth of a family's love and the timeless power of a well-told tale. As sleep deepens, the listener drifts into a vivid dream, transported to a sunlit training yard where a knight stands poised, the very image of medieval valor. Clad in gleaming armor that catches the light like a polished mirror, he grips a lance, its tip pointed skyward, and a heavy shield emblazoned with the emblem of his house. The clang of metal echoes as he practices precise strikes, each movement a blend of strength and grace honed by countless hours of discipline. This knight lives by a code, chivalry, a sacred set of ideals that bind him to loyalty, courage, and honor. He is sworn to protect his lord and the weak, to face danger without flinching, and to show respect and devotion in the courts of noble ladies. These principles shape not only his actions in battle, but also his behavior in the complex dance of medieval society, where reputation and virtue hold immense power. Yet, beneath the shining surface lies the harsh reality. The knight's life is fraught with peril. The thunder of hooves charges into the chaos of battle, where steel meets steel and the cry of war drowns the calm of the training yard. New weapons, like the deadly longbow, challenge the old ways, turning the tide with swift, piercing arrows that can fell even the bravest warrior. The dream reveals the tension between tradition and change, the knight's noble ideals meeting the brutal truth of evolving warfare. Still, the knight remains a powerful symbol of strength, justice, and a world governed by rules both spoken and unspoken. His presence inspires hope and fear, commanding respect across fields of battle and halls of power. To the common folk, he is a figure of awe, a living embodiment of the stories told around the hearth, where dreams of glory are born. As the dream begins to fade, the listener senses the knight's burden, the weight of armor and expectation, the sharp edge of duty cutting through the glory. And then, slowly, dawn breaks, pulling the listener back from this realm of knights and castles. Eyes open to the familiar dim light of the cottage, the sounds of village life returning, the crow of a rooster, the rustle of straw underfoot. The contrast is clear. The noble world of armor and honor gives way to the steady rhythm of peasant life, with its toil and simplicity. Yet the dream lingers, a spark of something greater amidst the everyday struggle. The knight's shining armor may be distant, but the courage, loyalty, and hope it represents remain alive, even here, in the fields and cottages of the village. The listener rises, carrying with them a quiet understanding that though born a peasant, the spirit of chivalry and bravery belongs to all who dare to face life with honor, no matter the armor they wear. The day begins anew, the dream a gentle reminder that beneath the earth and straw, stories of knights and courage beat steady in every heart. With the first light of dawn, the village stirs awake, a bustling hive of activity unfolding under the soft glow of morning. The scent of fresh bread wafts through narrow lanes as the baker fires up his oven, tossing dough into the warmth where it will soon rise and brown. From the blacksmith's forge comes the steady ring of hammer on anvil, sparks flying like tiny stars as he shapes horseshoes and tools with practiced hands. Nearby, children's laughter bubbles through the crisp air, chasing one another between thatched cottages and stacks of firewood, their carefree energy weaving through the waking village like a song. Above it all, the church bell tolls solemnly, its deep notes rolling over fields and rooftops, calling the faithful to morning prayer. The sound carries a steady rhythm, reminding all that faith holds the village together as surely as stone walls and shared labor. Doors creak open, neighbors exchange nods and greetings, and a quiet sense of belonging spreads with each step along the dusty paths. Walking through this vibrant scene, you notice the small details that bind the community. The weaver's shuttle moving deftly, the farmer guiding a cart laden with hay, the midwife preparing for the day's visits, all playing their part in a delicate dance of interdependence. Though the feudal hierarchy towers over this world like a distant mountain, lords and nobles shaping the fates of many, the heartbeat of the village pulses in these daily moments of shared purpose and care. Even in the simplest tasks, there is connection. The blacksmith's goods serve the farmers, the baker's bread fuels the workers. Children learn their place, their games echoing traditions passed down through generations. The village is more than a collection of isolated homes. It is a living organism, thriving on cooperation, faith, and the rhythms of the seasons. As you continue on your path, the sun climbing higher, you feel the pull of the fields awaiting your hands. The earth is ready, the rows stretching ahead like lines in an unfinished story. Yet even here, beneath the toil and soil, there is a stirring of change. Whispers drift from travelers and traders, news of towns growing larger, of new ideas traveling faster, and of old bonds loosening like worn ropes. The village hums like a beehive, alive with purpose and potential. It is a place rooted in tradition, but touched by the first breaths of a shifting world. As you take up your tools and join the steady work, your thoughts linger on this fragile balance between the comfort of the familiar and the promise of transformation. The fields may remain, but the story they tell is evolving, carried forward by every hand that tills the earth and every voice that joins the chorus of village life. Change stirs, even in these ancient lanes, and the day unfolds with all the energy of a world both old and new. The sun hangs high as you bend over the furrows, the rhythm of your work steady, but your mind drifting with the voices around you. From nearby, snippets of conversation reach your ears, soft murmurs and quick exchanges, carried on the warm breeze like scattered seeds. Among the laborers, gossip flows freely, not just of crops or village news, but of something larger, something new stirring beyond the fields. "Have you heard?" one says, wiping sweat from his brow. "The towns grow taller every year. More merchants come with strange goods, spices from far lands, silks that shimmer like water." Another nods, voice low with excitement. "They say these merchants are no longer just traders. They gather wealth that rivals the lords, their coins clinking louder than swords in the halls." Curiosity peaks within you. The old order, with its castles and nobles, seems vast and unchanging, but these whispers suggest cracks are forming in its foundation. Tales of bustling marketplaces, of goods and ideas flowing faster than ever before, hint at a world shifting beneath your feet. Beyond trade, talk turns to discoveries that feel almost magical. A scholar passing through the village spoke of ancient texts, forgotten books unearthed from dusty monasteries, full of knowledge from long ago. These writings, they say, breathe new life into fields as diverse as medicine, science, and art. The very foundations of thought seem to tremble as curiosity blooms, spreading like spring's first green shoots after a long winter. Among the workers, there is a sense of cautious hope. The old bonds, feudal lords, rigid customs, unyielding hierarchies begin to show wear. Peasants like yourself murmur about opportunities once unimaginable. Better wages, more freedom, a voice that might someday carry weight beyond the manor walls. Yet, beneath this hope, a shadow of uncertainty lingers. Change is never easy. The rise of merchants and new ideas threatens the known world, and with it, the delicate balance of power. Some fear the future, clinging to what has been, while others dare to dream of what might come. Merchants grow rich, an elder says as you pass by, and their coins ring louder than swords. The world is waking, whether we're ready or not. You carry these words with you as the day wanes. The sun's warmth fades, and the village quiets, the day's labor settling into memory. Walking back along familiar paths, you feel the weight of both your place and the world's restless turning. At home, the hearth's glow welcomes you, yet your thoughts remain adrift in the currents of change. The fields await your hands again tomorrow, steady and unyielding, but the stories of new ideas, rising towns, and shifting power whisper in your mind. New ideas stir like seeds in spring, small, fragile, but filled with promise. The old world holds on, but the dawn of something different edges closer. You sit quietly, weary but contemplative, the future a puzzle waiting to be pieced together. The path ahead is uncertain, but one thing is clear. The world you know is beginning to transform, and your place within it may not be as fixed as it once seemed. The evening settles gently around your small cottage, the fading light outside giving way to the warm, steady glow of the hearth. Flames flicker softly, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls, and the quiet murmur of your family nearby fills the room with a comforting presence. The familiar creak of wooden beams and the faint crackle of burning wood create a soothing rhythm, wrapping the space in a peaceful embrace. You sit close to the fire, its warmth seeping into your chilled hands and tired bones. The day's labors weigh heavy, but in this calm moment, a different kind of weight rests upon your mind. A quiet contemplation of the life you lead within this vast, ordered world. You think of the feudal hierarchy that shapes every breath you take, the king far beyond the horizon, the noble lord whose manor governs these lands, the clergy whose prayers weave through every season, and yourself, bound to the soil, a humble peasant working the earth. Your role is clear, carved as deeply as the furrows in the field. There is a certain comfort in this certainty, a rhythm that echoes through generations, connecting you to ancestors long past and to those who will come after. Faith weaves through your thoughts like a steady thread. The church's teachings guide you to endure with patience, to accept your place with humility, and to find meaning beyond the struggles of daily toil. You remember the solemn chants from the cathedral, the scent of incense rising in prayer, the stories of saints and martyrs whose lives were testaments to devotion and sacrifice. In these beliefs, you find solace and purpose. Yet, even as the familiar customs soothe your heart, you sense whispers of change beyond your village, the shifting tides that might someday touch your life. Still, tonight, beneath the sturdy roof of your home, tradition holds strong. The hearth's warmth is a reminder of continuity amid uncertainty. Here, love and labor, faith and family intertwine in a quiet dance that has played out countless times before. A soft voice breaks the silence, your mother's perhaps, speaking gently of the morrow's chores, or your father's quiet reply. These sounds, simple and enduring, form the backdrop of your reflections. The world outside may grow restless, but here within these walls, time flows steady and sure. As the fire dwindles to glowing embers, your eyelids grow heavy. The steady beat of life slows, and your thoughts drift, carrying you beyond the hearth and home. Castles rise on distant hills, their towers reaching skyward. Cathedrals stretch heavenward, their stained glass catching light like captured stars. Knights ride through misty forests, their armor gleaming in the dawn. You glimpse the broad tapestry of the medieval world, a realm of strength, faith, and mystery. The fire's warmth soothes a weary heart, and in faith, you find your place. The past and future seem to meet in this moment of quiet peace as sleep pulls you gently into its embrace. Your dreams unfold, painted with the colors of history and hope, a world vast and alive, waiting just beyond the flickering flame. As sleep deepens, your mind carries you far from the humble cottage where the hearth's embers glow faintly. You find yourself standing before a towering castle, its massive stone walls rising like ancient sentinels against a sky brushed with twilight hues. The fortress looms grand and unyielding, a world apart, carved from earth and ambition, where power breathes in every stone. Within these walls, the air is thick with life and whispered secrets. Flickering torches line narrow corridors, their golden light dancing on tapestries woven with tales of battles won and lost. The great hall is alive with the murmur of voices, lords and ladies gathered for a feast, their laughter mingling with the clink of goblets and the rich aroma of roasted meats and spiced wine. Minstrels pluck lively tunes, their melodies weaving through the stone arches, while beneath the polished wooden tables, servants move silently, attending to every need. But behind the grandeur lies a world of intrigue, whispers in shadowed corners, cautious glances exchanged over cups of ale, the subtle clash of ambition beneath velvet cloaks. This castle is a stage for power, a fortress where fortunes are won and lost, and where the fate of kingdoms may be decided. Your dream shifts, and now you stand beneath the soaring arches of a cathedral. Light pours through stained glass windows, painting the stone floor with vibrant mosaics of ruby reds, sapphire blues, and emerald greens. The towering pillars stretch upward as if reaching toward the heavens themselves, and the vaulted ceiling echoes with the soft, haunting chant of monks in prayer. The scent of incense swirls around you, mingling with the cool breath of stone and ancient wood. You hear the measured steps of clergy moving in solemn procession, their voices rising in timeless hymns that speak of faith, hope, and salvation. This cathedral is not just a building, it is a sanctuary, a place where the earthly and divine meet, where the community gathers to seek comfort and guidance in uncertain times. Both castle and cathedral stand as mighty symbols, one of worldly power, the other of spiritual strength. They loom vast and majestic, their presence casting long shadows over the village fields you know so well. In your dream, you feel the weight of this contrast deeply, the grandeur of stone towers and stained glass set against the simplicity of your own life, shaped by soil and sweat. Yet there is no bitterness here, only awe. These monuments tell stories of a world larger than your own, a world of kings and priests, of battles and prayers, of ambition and devotion. They remind you of the many threads that weave together the medieval tapestry, threads you touch, if only faintly, in your daily toil and dreams. As dawn approaches, the sounds of the castle's feast fade, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft murmur of a waking village. The cathedral's chants grow distant, giving way to the caw of birds greeting the new day. Light filters through your window, chasing away the shadows of night. A familiar, sharp crow breaks the quiet. The rooster's call, insistent and clear, pulling you back to the rhythm of village life. You stir beneath your blanket, the dream dissolving but leaving behind a sense of wonder and connection to a world both near and far. The castle stands proud, a world beyond reach. The cathedral sings of heaven's glory, and you, in your simple home, are part of it all, rooted in the earth, reaching toward the light. The day begins anew. You awaken to the soft light filtering through the narrow window of your modest townhouse, nestled amid the winding streets of a bustling medieval town. Outside, the day has already begun. The clatter of wooden carts rolling over cobblestones mingles with the distant calls of hawkers pitching their wares. The scent of fresh bread drifts from a nearby bakery, blending with the sharp tang of smoke rising from chimneys. This is the rhythm of urban life, alive, vibrant, and full of promise. Rising from your simple bed, you dress in the coarse but sturdy clothes of your trade. Today, like every day, your hands will bring form and purpose to raw materials. Whether you are a carpenter shaping timber with practiced precision, or a blacksmith bending glowing iron to your will, the workshop awaits, a place filled with the familiar sense of sawdust and hot metal, the steady rhythm of tools meeting wood or steel. You grasp your hammer, feeling the weight settle comfortably in your palm. With each strike, the hammer sings a clear, sharp note, echoing the pulse of creation itself. Splinters fly, sparks dance, and slowly, under your careful hands, a plank becomes a table leg, a bar of iron a horseshoe. This is work honed over generations, a craft passed from father to son, mother to daughter, carrying the pride and skill of countless artisans before you. Around you, the town hums with life. Bakers pull golden loaves from brick ovens, their faces flushed with heat and satisfaction. Merchants unload bolts of cloth and barrels of spices, their voices rising in lively barter. Monks in simple habits pass by, their quiet presence a reminder of the spiritual world woven into the fabric of daily existence. Children dart between stalls, laughter ringing through narrow alleys. The church bell tolls overhead, marking the passage of time and calling the faithful to midday prayers. This town is a crossroads, a place where old traditions meet new ideas. Word spreads of distant lands and exotic goods brought by merchants traveling far beyond the city walls. Rumors swirl of inventions and discoveries that could reshape life itself. You listen with keen ears, curiosity flickering alongside the steady pride in your own craft. Though your hands shape the tangible, your mind reaches toward these broader horizons. The town's energy is contagious, each new idea a seed planted in fertile ground, promising change and growth. You feel part of a larger story, one stretching beyond your workshop, beyond the familiar streets, toward a future still unfolding. A merchant's arrival interrupts your thoughts, a caravan leader bearing news of far-off kingdoms, strange customs, and rare treasures. His tales spark excitement among the townsfolk, weaving distant worlds into your daily life. The pulse of trade quickens, and with it, the promise of new opportunities. For now, though, you return to your workbench. The hammer rises and falls, steady and sure. The rhythm of craft and commerce beats strong here, shaping not just wood and metal, but the very future of this growing town. The hammer sings with each strike, shaping the future. The town pulses with life and trade. And as the sun climbs higher, so does your spirit, ready to meet the day's challenges and dreams. The merchants' wagons rumbled into town like a parade of wonders, their wooden wheels creaking over the cobblestones, laden with treasures from distant lands. Bright bolts of silk, shimmering with colors unknown to these parts, spilled over the edges of crates. Barrels of spices, cinnamon, cloves, and pepper, filled the air with exotic scents that teased the senses and promised faraway adventures. The townsfolk gathered eagerly along the streets, their eyes wide with curiosity and anticipation. Children pressed forward, fingers reaching toward the rich fabrics and gleaming trinkets. Merchants and craftsmen exchanged glances, aware that these goods signaled not just wealth, but change. The merchant himself stood tall atop his wagon, his voice rich and animated as he spun tales of far-off cities where grand palaces glittered under sunlit skies and markets overflowed with wonders. He spoke of scholars debating new ways to capture the world's depth in painting, using perspective to transform flat images into windows of life, and engineers crafting mechanical devices that could move without human hands. These ideas stirred the crowd like embers catching a sudden breeze. The merchant was more than a trader of goods. He was a bridge between worlds, carrying not only silk and spices, but knowledge and possibility. His presence was a spark, igniting dreams of a world larger and more connected than the one the villagers had always known. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the narrow streets, the townsfolk's chatter grew lively. Many made their way toward the local tavern, where fires burned warm and stories flowed as freely as the ale. You joined them, stepping into the dimly lit room filled with the mingled scents of smoke, sweat, and spiced wine. Around you, familiar faces listen intently as the merchant recounts his journeys, each word painting pictures of unfamiliar lands and strange customs. The tavern becomes a portal to the wider world. You hear whispers of caravans crossing vast deserts, of ships navigating treacherous seas, of inventions that might reshape daily life. New ideas spark in your mind, visions of how your craft might evolve, how the town might grow, how the future might beckon with opportunity and challenge. Yet amid this excitement, there is also reflection. Change feels both thrilling and uncertain, a tide rising to sweep away the old even as it promises something new. The merchant's tales remind you that the world is vast and full of possibility, but also that the roots in your own town, in your daily work and community, remain vital. The merchant's wares dazzle, a glimpse of the East, someone murmurs nearby, capturing the mood perfectly. You raise your cup in quiet toast, to the journeys ahead, to the stories shared, to the promise carried on every whispered wind. New ideas spark like embers in the mind, and as the night deepens, the tavern's warmth holds you, a small haven in a changing world, where past and future meet beneath flickering candlelight. The tavern's wooden beams creaked softly as the night deepened, the air thick with the mingled scents of ale, smoke, and worn leather. Laughter bubbled up from every corner, a warm, comforting hum that wrapped around you like a familiar cloak. Flickering candlelight danced across faces, rough hands gripping tankards, eyes bright with stories waiting to be told. The hearth blazed steadily, its glow chasing away the chill of the evening and drawing the crowd closer together. Around the heavy oak tables, craftsmen swapped tales between sips of frothy ale. A blacksmith boasted of a sword he'd forged for a distant noble, its blade said to have cut through armor like paper. Nearby, a weaver described the latest courtly fashions from the capital, rich velvets trimmed with gold thread, far beyond anything the village could afford. Travelers shared news of new schools where scholars debated ancient texts, stirring curiosity and a hunger for knowledge among the listeners. You listen and nod, feeling pride in your own craft, the careful shaping of wood or metal, the skill passed down from father to son. Yet amid that pride, a spark of wonder stirs. These stories, these glimpses of a wider world, beckon you beyond the familiar streets and fields. The tavern is more than a place to drink and rest. It is a crossroads where different lives and ideas meet, where peasants and merchants, soldiers and scholars mingle in a lively exchange. The tavern hums with tales of far-off realms, someone says, raising their cup in a toast that echoes through the room. You catch yourself dreaming of distant lands, imagining the faces behind these stories, their hopes, fears, and adventures. Yet you are grounded here, rooted in your craft, in the rhythms of this town, in the hands that shape the tools of daily life. It is a balance between belonging and longing, a dance between what is and what might be. As the night winds down, voices soften and the fire burns low. You rise from the table, the warmth of companionship lingering in your bones. Outside, the stars glitter cold and distant above the sleeping town, a vast tapestry stretching beyond any single life. Walking home along familiar paths, the quiet night invites reflection. The world feels both immense and intimate, full of stories yet to unfold. You step inside your modest home, the wooden door creaking shut behind you, and prepare to rest. Your thoughts drift as sleep claims you, weaving dreams of knights and castles, of journeys beyond the village walls. In these dreams, the medieval world stretches wide, a tapestry of lives intertwined, ancient and new, humble and grand. Your craft anchors you, yet the world calls, whispers the night, carrying you softly into slumber. The tavern's warmth fades into the quiet hush of home, and with it, the promise of tomorrow's stories waits patiently to be told. In the quiet stillness of night, your dreams carry you far from the village hearth to the restless soul of Louis, a young crusader bound by faith and torn by doubt. Born in a modest French village, Louis was a child of prayer long before he wore the armor of war. His days began and ended with whispered devotions, a stark contrast to his father's stern wishes for him to follow the sword without question. Yet Louis's heart clung to a higher calling, seeking peace amid the gathering storm. As the call to crusade echoed across Christendom, Louis's faith drove him forward. He joined the swelling ranks of knights and peasants bound for Jerusalem, their hopes wrapped tightly in promises of salvation and glory. The journey was long and merciless, harsh deserts burning beneath an unforgiving sun, nights cold and filled with fear. Along dusty roads, Louis prayed for strength, his spirit both bolstered and worn thin by the hardships of the march. Arriving at Jerusalem, Louis faced a city under siege, its walls echoing with the clash of steel and cries of agony. The brutal reality of the Crusades shattered the idealism that had once fueled him. As the gates fell and the conquerors surged through the streets, Louis made a choice that set him apart. He refused to raise his sword in the slaughter of innocents. Amid the chaos, he knelt in prayer, seeking mercy and redemption where others found only wrath. The Holy Land's blood stains his soul, your dream whispers, the weight of his torment pressing heavy in the air. His comrades, swept up in the fervor of conquest, could not understand Louis's hesitation. To them, the fight was holy, righteous, and necessary. But Louis's heart recoiled from the violence, questioning the cost of salvation measured in bloodshed. The zeal that had once burned bright within him flickered, replaced by shadows of doubt and sorrow. As the crusade drew to a close, Louis turned away from the battlefield and began the long journey home. His footsteps carried him back across the seas and fields, a pilgrim not only of faith, but of conscience. In the quiet of France, he sought a new path, one of compassion rather than conquest, healing rather than harm. His legacy became one of mercy, a quiet challenge to the harshness of the age. You watch as Louis tends to the sick and comforts the broken, his hands gentle where once they bore a sword. His story is one of redemption, a reminder that even in times of war, the human heart can choose grace over cruelty. The dream begins to fade, leaving behind a lingering question, a call to reflect on the cost of belief and the power of compassion. As dawn's light creeps through your window, you awaken from Louis's story, carrying the echoes of his struggle in your own heart. The medieval world, with all its battles and faith, remains a tapestry woven from both valor and doubt, cruelty and hope. And so, Louis's dream becomes a quiet prayer for peace, whispered across the centuries. Louis's return to France was marked by quiet determination. The land he once left as a restless youth had changed. Fields lay overgrown, villages still bearing the scars of distant wars, and his family's manor, weathered but standing, awaited his stewardship. As he stepped onto the familiar soil, a sense of purpose settled within him. No longer the zealous crusader driven by conquest, Louis had returned transformed, carrying the weight of experience and a deep desire to heal what had been broken. He set to work with a steady hand, determined to restore his lands not through force, but through justice. Taxes were lowered to ease the burden on weary peasants, and courts were established to ensure fairness and resolve disputes peacefully. Louis understood that true strength lay in harmony, not domination. His governance was marked by compassion, reflecting the lessons he had learned far from home. Yet Louis's influence extended beyond his fields. His travels to the east during the Crusades had opened his eyes to knowledge and wisdom unknown in his homeland. He became a patron of scholars, inviting learned men and women to share the treasures of Eastern philosophy, science, and medicine. Manuscripts and strange scripts found their way to Louis's court, sparking curiosity and new ideas. The boundaries between East and West began to blur, and with them, the medieval world grew wider and richer. In his hands, the wisdom of the East becomes a beacon for the West, villagers would say, as Louis's court blossomed into a center of learning and culture. As years passed, Louis's heart sought deeper peace. He embraced a quieter life within the walls of a monastery, dedicating himself to prayer and reflection. There, among cloistered halls and gentle chants, he found solace from the burdens of his past. The warrior's sword was laid aside, replaced by a humble cross, the symbol of a crusade not fought on battlefields, but within the soul. In prayer, Louis found his true crusade, whispered the monks who tended his final days. But even as Louis sought tranquility, the medieval world around him was shifting once again. Far to the east, a new force was rising, the Mongols, fierce and unstoppable, carving paths across lands with thunderous momentum. Their shadow stretched toward Europe, portending a fresh wave of upheaval and challenge. Louis's story closes in serene restoration, yet the future looms vast and uncertain. His legacy is one of wisdom earned through struggle, and the hope that peace can grow even from the ashes of war. The age of knights and castles, of crusades and cathedrals, slowly gives way to a world on the brink of new transformations, ushered in by distant riders with bows drawn and empires to forge. The story of the Mongols begins with a boy named Temujin, born into hardship on the vast, windswept steppes of Central Asia. Raised among fierce tribes often torn by rivalry, he endured betrayal and exile. Yet from these brutal beginnings, Temujin rose with iron will and unmatched cunning. Uniting the fractured Mongol clans under a single banner, he was crowned Genghis Khan, universal ruler. His vision was not just of survival, but of conquest, and his armies became a force unlike any the world had seen. The Mongol warriors were swift as the wind, their cavalry unstoppable. Mounted archers loosed arrows with deadly precision, striking fear into the hearts of enemies. Their tactics were ruthless, sieges where entire cities fell and whole populations were shattered in their wake. The thunder of thousands of hooves echoed across Asia as the Mongols swept from the steppes into kingdoms and empires. In 1258, the fall of Baghdad sent shockwaves through the Muslim world. Once a gleaming center of learning and culture, the city was stormed and sacked, its treasures plundered, and its people scattered. The destruction was staggering, and tales of the Mongols' ferocity traveled far and wide, painting them as both destroyers and agents of change. Yet beneath the fearsome reputation lay a surprising legacy. The Mongols fostered a vast network of trade and communication across the Silk Road, connecting east and west as never before. Merchants traveled safely under their protection, carrying silks, spices, and ideas. Cultural exchanges flourished along the caravan routes, blending traditions and knowledge. Genghis Khan's hooves thunder across the steppes, the storytellers say, and the Silk Road blooms under their rule. Their empire, vast and diverse, left a mark not only of conquest, but of connection. The Mongols reshaped the medieval world, sowing seeds that would influence trade, diplomacy, and culture for centuries. As the listener awakens from these tales of sweeping empires and mighty horsemen, they find themselves once again in their humble village. The distant rumble of history fades to the quiet rhythm of daily life, reminding them that even the grandest stories rest upon the small and steady lives of ordinary people. Reflecting on the vastness of the Mongol conquests, and the intricate web of history, the listener contemplates their own place in the unfolding tapestry of time. The world is vast, fierce, and ever-changing, but within its flow, every life, no matter how small, carries its own quiet importance. After the tumult of distant empires, battles, and sweeping changes, the listener returns once more to their quiet village, a world shaped by simple, enduring rhythms. The dawn breaks softly over the fields, and with it comes the familiar sense of earth and wood smoke. The same routines unfold, tending the animals, turning the soil, sharing humble meals with family beneath the steady, watchful sky. Outside, the tides of history surge, kingdoms rise and fall, armies march and retreat, new ideas ripple across continents. But here, life moves with a steadiness that defies the chaos. The listener feels the pulse of the village, neighbors greeting one another, the blacksmith's steady hammer, children's laughter weaving through the air. This world, though small in the grand scope, holds its own profound strength. In this grounded existence, values are simple but steadfast: the dignity of honest labor, the bonds of community, and the quiet refuge of faith. The church bell tolls, a reminder that in the midst of life's uncertainty, some things remain constant. It is these threads, the shared struggles, celebrations, and prayers, that bind generations together. As evening falls, the listener settles by the hearth, its warm glow flickering against the worn stones of the cottage. The firelight seems to hold centuries of stories, each flame a whisper from the past. In this moment of quiet reflection, memories swirl, the stories heard as a child, the hard lessons learned in the fields, the faces of loved ones long gone, and those yet to come. Your life, small yet vital, weaves into history, the fire seems to say. The realization settles gently. The peasant's life, though often overlooked by grand chronicles, forms the foundation upon which all else is built. In the stillness, the listener imagines their final days, surrounded by family who carry forward the legacy of resilience. Faces worn by toil, but bright with love, gather close, sharing stories and prayers, their voices a soft chorus against the night. Though the listener's journey ends, the enduring spirit of their life carries on in the village's heartbeat, the soil's fertility, and the unbroken chain of lives that span centuries. The medieval world may fade into history, but its legacy, rooted in lives like theirs, remains alive, quietly shaping the world that follows. With this serene acceptance, the listener's story closes, a humble testament to the timeless endurance of ordinary lives amidst the vast tides of history. The small cottage sits quietly beneath a soft, fading light. Inside, the listener lies on a humble bed, surrounded by family whose faces carry the warmth of love and sorrow. The air is thick with the gentle hum of whispered prayers and the flicker of candle flames casting dancing shadows on worn wooden walls. This is a moment suspended in time, a final breath drawn between the world they knew and the eternity beyond. The listener's eyes, though dimmed by age and wear, gleam with the quiet wisdom of a life fully lived. Memories stir gently within, weaving a tapestry of years marked by toil in the fields, by shared laughter around the hearth, and by the steady rhythm of community life. Each furrow turned, every meal broken in company, every festival celebrated, all rise up as echoes of purpose and belonging. The years have not always been easy. Hardship and loss were frequent companions, but so were love, resilience, and small joys that brighten the darkest days. The listener remembers the first steps of children now grown, the friendship of neighbors who stood through storms and drought, and the faith that carried them through uncertainty. Their hands, once roughened by labor, now rest peacefully, knowing the legacy of their efforts will endure in the fertile soil and the lives nurtured upon it. A family member leans close, voice soft but steady. Your children carry your story forward. The listener nods faintly, heart comforted by the knowledge that the land they tended, the values they upheld, and the love they gave will not vanish with their passing. As the fire in the hearth flickers low, a peaceful calm settles over the room. Breath slows and light seems to fade from the eyes, replaced by a serene glow, an unspoken release from earthly burdens. The soul, tethered to this humble life, now gently slips free, crossing a threshold into a boundless quiet. Beyond the cottage walls, the world of the medieval era continues its vast unfolding. Castles stand tall, cathedrals rise towards the heavens, and the echoes of battles, faith, and daily struggles ripple through time. Yet it is in lives like the listeners, the steady heartbeat of common folk, that the true legacy of the age is found. Their endurance, their faith, their work, and their community are the threads that bind history's great tapestry. Though the listener's story concludes here, the land endures, as do the countless lives shaped by this era. A quiet testament remains, that even the humblest existence carries meaning beyond measure, and that every life well lived leaves a lasting mark on the world. The candle's flame finally guttering, the narrative pulls back, sweeping across centuries, across lands and peoples, celebrating the medieval world's complex, enduring legacy woven from both grandeur and humility alike. The medieval world, with its towering castles and soaring cathedrals, may have faded into the mists of time, but its legacy remains steadfast, etched deep into the stones and stories that still stand today. Weathered walls, worn by centuries of wind and rain, whisper tales of faith and fortitude, of communities forged in both hardship and hope. These remnants are more than mere ruins. They are living echoes of a world that shaped the foundations of our own. Within the rough-hewn stones lie values that have endured far beyond the Middle Ages, faith that bound hearts and souls, communities that thrived on shared purpose and support, resilience that met every challenge, from war to plague, with unyielding spirit. These ideals, born from a time so different yet so familiar, continue to pulse quietly in the rhythm of modern life. You, the listener, are connected to this rich history. Your life, too, threads through the vast human tapestry, woven alongside countless others who lived, loved, and persevered across the centuries. The lessons of courage, loyalty, and hope that blossomed in medieval fields and halls flow within you still, a reminder that history is not distant, but alive inside us all. As the medieval era draws to a close, the dawn of the Renaissance begins to glow on the horizon, a new chapter bursting with curiosity, discovery, and change. Yet even as new ideas illuminate the world, the past remains a steadfast foundation. The stones of castles and cathedrals stand as monuments to both endurance and transformation, bridging old and new. The past lives in every stone and story, the narrator whispers, and you too are part of this tapestry. This call invites reflection and pride, urging you to carry forward the spirit of those who came before, to dream, to build, and to live with the same courage and faith. As the fire dims and night deepens, the narrator bids a gentle farewell, a soothing goodnight that wraps around you like a warm cloak. The stories of old now settle into silence, giving way to dreams, dreams of knights and scholars, of towering spires and bustling villages, of a world forever connected through the ages. Sleep well, dear listener, and carry this legacy with you into the dawn of your own story. As the tapestry of the medieval world slowly folds away, its vibrant threads gently fade into the quiet night. The age of castles and cathedrals, of knights and peasants, of faith and fierce struggle, draws to a close, not with a crash, but with the soft closing of a well-loved book. Yet though the medieval world may vanish from sight, its lessons linger, woven deeply into the fabric of who we are. Resilience, faith, and humanity's unbroken spirit. These are the gifts the Middle Ages offer us, a timeless inheritance. From the stone walls that withstood sieges to the quiet prayers whispered in cloisters, from the hopes of common folk to the ambitions of kings, every story speaks of endurance and heart. These lessons are not relics, but living guides, shining lights to lead you through your own challenges and dreams. Look closely, and you'll see the echoes of medieval wonder in your own world. The starry night that has always stirred the human soul, the communities that shape your life, the courage to face an uncertain future. Just like those who dreamed beneath soaring spires and endless skies centuries ago, you too can find magic in the everyday, strength in the ordinary. Let the medieval world guide your dreams, the narrator gently urges, and carry its spirit with you wherever your path may lead. This is not an end, but an invitation to walk forward inspired by the past, to write your own chapter in the great human story. If this journey through time has sparked your curiosity and touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more adventures into history's vast landscapes. Together, we will explore new worlds, meet forgotten heroes, and uncover stories that shape us still. Now, as the night deepens and your eyes grow heavy, sleep comes softly, wrapping you in a peaceful embrace. Sleep now and awake to wonder, the narrator whispers, sending you off with wishes for dreams filled with medieval wonders, of knight's courage, cathedral light, and the enduring fire of human spirit. Good night, dear listener. May your dreams carry the legacy of ages past, and may you greet the dawn with the same hope that has carried countless souls through the tides of time.